This presentation was created by Jon Mazie and Mazie. The research article we chose is called The Role of Stressful Life Events and Cultural Factors on Criminal Thinking Among African American Women Involved in the Criminal Justice System. The article is by Tanja C. Link and Carrie B. Osser. This article focuses on how cultural factors and stressful life events are making African American women more likely to be incarcerated compared to other races. It is said that these different events and factors often lead to criminal thinking being their coping strategy. Criminological research still is failing to focus on African American women, even though they are extremely disadvantaged and negatively affected by the criminal justice system. Because of the failure of the criminological research to focus on African American women, this research article explains how they used data from 418 African American women who were either in prison or on probation to better understand the stressors that they are experiencing and the relationship of those stressors to their developed criminal thinking. In the research article, it is hypothesized that prisoners will experience more stressors and cultural mistrust, and they will also have problems with ethnic identity and spirituality compared to others who are on probation. Additionally, it is also hypothesized that all stressors and criminal thinking are positively associated and that the gendered racism will have the most significant correlation to criminal thinking. African American women who show lower levels of criminal thinking are thought to be more spiritually involved, have stronger ethnic identifications, and show less cultural mistrust. Employment and finances, personal illness or injury, social network loss, child victimization, and gender racism are the 5 main social circumstances in which African American women's stressors occur. If better understanding occurs from this research article, us as readers can be more capable of creating solutions to this racial issue. The article clearly explains that before this research, there was no other study done on how different stressors in African American women's lives affects a criminal thinking coping mechanism. But in the past, there has been different research done on intersectionality and how it can lead to negative health issues and different coping mechanisms that are adapted by the victim. The thing that really makes this research article different is that the research is based only on African American women. This research article brings light to African American women who have been overlooked for many years throughout lots of different criminological research. I think the authors of this research article wish they could see that there has been a change over time, but previous research on this issue lacks greatly. Without a decent amount of past research on this same issue, which there is not, then a change over time cannot be verified.
The data for this study was compiled from a federally funded project called Black Women in a Study of Epidemics. The data was collected from 2008 through 2011. The purpose of this study was to examine health issues and services of African American women in the criminal justice system. Criteria to be included in this study was identifying as African American, being at least 18 years old, willingness to participate, and speaking English. The variable of interest, criminal thinking, was measured using a version of the criminal thinking scale. 6 socio-demographic variables were included in the study. The variables were age, number of kids, education, marital status, annual income, and illicit drug use. The final sample size was 418 African American women who were either incarcerated or on probation. About half of the women were interviewed in prison, and of those women, 65% had used illicit drugs in the past year when they were not in prison. Table 1 shows that the average participant was a 35-year-old, unmarried woman with 2 children, had a high school diploma, and a household income of $17,320. The women in this study scored above the average for personal injury and victimization over the past year. The women also scored below the average in the financial and employment variables. Moderate levels of gendered racism, the culturally specific social stressor, were reported. Table 2 shows that African American women's level of criminal thinking did not significantly change based on their level of involvement in the criminal justice system. It also shows that the women incarcerated were significantly older than women on probation by almost 2 years. It also shows that African American women in the prison sample were showing significantly higher levels of cultural mistrust as compared to the women on probation.
The first hypothesis of this research article was that individual stressors would be associated with criminal thinking. This hypothesis from this research was only partially supported. Personal illness and victimization were the 2 main stressors in the study that did not directly correlate to criminal thinking. But on the other hand, employment, finances, and social network loss were all stressors that did show a strong correlation to the increase of criminal thinking among the subjects. The second hypothesis of this research article was that gendered racism as a stressor would be the one most correlated to the increase of criminal thinking. This hypothesis was not supported by the data. Gendered racism was not significantly correlated to criminal thinking compared to past year involvement with drug use. Past year involvement with drug use was more closely correlated with criminal thinking development with women in prison and on probation. Lastly, the third hypothesis was only partially supported as well. The third one hypothesized that African American women who possess a strong ethnic identity, high levels of spirituality, and lower levels of cultural mistrust would report lower levels of criminal thinking. Spirituality contributed to lower levels of criminal thinking, while cultural mistrust contributed to higher levels of criminal thinking. Because of this study, it is known that criminal thinking may be a coping mechanism for some African American women in prison and on probation. From these findings, criminal justice agencies and citizens should be more capable to promote programs that will help alleviate these stressors to keep the women from being reincarcerated.
This study is supported by cross-sectional quantitative data, which means each variable is tested on its own. So the possibility of the variables being connected cannot be tested. Because the variables are all tested separately, we can only say how each individual variable affects the women's criminal thinking. If there was a way to test variables together, it could show that some of the variables correspond with each other and contribute to criminal thinking. For example, if we could test the influence of economic status and gendered racism together to see their conjoined influence on criminal thinking, we could see if they played a major role together for incarcerated women. Also, the study was conducted on 418 women. If the size of the sample population was larger, we could get a better representative sample of African American incarcerated women. The sample size could be specific to the single prison that was studied. Maybe other prisons will give different results due to their difference in location. Also, the study did not take into consideration traumatic life events such as losing a job, losing a loved one, losing a home, or even being cheated on. There is a magnitude of other influences that could incite criminal thinking, and they are not included in this study.